My brother stole my identity while I was in jail for him, so I took him to court and made sure he lost everything he ever loved. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the one cleaning up my brother's messes. It's almost like it was written into my role as the responsible one, while he got to be the reckless golden child. Our parents always brushed off his mistakes as boys will be boys, while every little thing I did was picked apart and judged. I grew up carrying the weight of his screw-ups, hoping one day he'd recognize it and finally stand up for himself. Spoiler alert, he never did. My brother Ryan has always had a talent for lying his way out of things. He'd charm teachers, girlfriends, even our own parents with that fake grin of his. Meanwhile, I'd be the one staying late at work to cover his debts or lending him money I couldn't afford to lose. And every single time he'd swear up and down, "I'll make it right, bro. I swear." He never made it right. I still remember our mom saying once, "You should be more like Ryan. He knows how to live." I laughed bitterly inside because living, to him, meant burning bridges, draining bank accounts, and expecting me to clean the ashes. I can't lie, it ate away at me. But I kept my mouth shut, telling myself family was family, and one day he'd come around. Then came the night that changed everything. Ryan called me in the middle of my shift, his voice panicked, saying he'd gotten into trouble again. He needed me just like always. I could hear shouting in the background, maybe cops, maybe some angry guys he owed money to. Against my better judgment, I left work and showed up, because that's what I'd always done. I didn't know it then, but that night would set off a chain of events that would cost me everything. When I pulled up that night, Ryan was pacing like a caged animal in the parking lot of some dingy bar. His eyes darted around wild, like he was already caught even before anything happened. I remember stepping out of my car, my stomach in knots, the stench of stale beer and cigarette smoke hanging heavy in the air. "Finally," he hissed, rushing up to me. "You gotta take the fall for this one. Please, just this once. I can't go back inside. I'll die in there." I froze. My chest tightened. Take the fall? My brain scrambled to process what he was even asking. Before I could respond, flashing blue lights filled the parking lot. My brother's hands gripped my shoulders so tightly it felt like he was trying to pin me in place. "Don't say a word," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Just trust me. You can handle this better than I can." The next few minutes blurred together in a haze of shouted orders and the cold, metallic click of handcuffs around my wrists. The officer said something about an unpaid debt, stolen property, and a scuffle inside the bar. Ryan kept his distance, head lowered, like he was just some bystander watching the show. I wanted to scream his name, to call him out right there, but my mouth felt sewn shut. My parents' voices echoed in my head. "Protect your brother. He's not as strong as you. Be the bigger man." So when they shoved me into the back of the squad car, I stayed silent. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat screaming that this wasn't fair. But some sick part of me still clung to the idea that Ryan would fix it, that he'd tell the truth, that he'd have my back just once. As the car pulled away and the bar's neon lights faded into the distance, I couldn't shake the sinking feeling that I'd just signed away more than a night in jail. The first night in jail felt like falling into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The walls were this dull, sickly gray that seemed to press in on me, and every sound, the slam of doors, the echo of footsteps, reminded me that I didn't belong there. I wasn't a criminal. I was just the idiot who thought protecting his brother mattered more than protecting himself. I tried to call home, my fingers trembling as I dialed. Mom picked up, her voice clipped, tired. "Why'd you get yourself into this, huh? Why can't you be more like Ryan? He never drags us through this kind of embarrassment." My stomach dropped. She didn't even ask if I was okay. She didn't even let me explain. It was like she had already decided I was guilty. I tried again the next day, this time reaching Dad. His response wasn't much better. "Do your time quietly. Don't make it harder than it needs to be." And then the line went dead. Ryan, of course, didn't visit, didn't call, didn't even send a message. I pictured him out there, walking free, probably spinning another one of his sob stories to keep everyone on his side. I lay on that stiff mattress, staring at the ceiling, feeling the bitterness boil in my chest. Days turned into weeks, and I clung to the hope that maybe he was working on clearing things up. Maybe he'd surprise me and finally come through. But instead, whispers started reaching me. A guard leaned in one day, smirking. "Man, your brother's living it up. Driving around, flashing cash. All under your name. I laughed out loud at first, thinking it was some sick joke. But when I pressed my cellmate for details, he nodded slowly, almost pitying me. Nah, man. Word is he's been signing your name on things. You better check that when you get out. My blood went cold. Somewhere deep inside, I knew they weren't lying, and that's when I realized Ryan hadn't just left me to rot here. He was building his future on the ashes of mine. When I finally walked out of those gates, I thought I'd feel free. Instead, the air outside felt heavier, like I was stepping into another prison, just one without bars. My clothes hung loose from the weight I'd lost. My eyes burned from sleepless nights, and all I wanted was a chance to breathe again. But the second I checked my phone messages and mail, my stomach twisted. There were bills stacked up, collection notices, and angry letters from banks. Credit cards I'd never opened. Loans I'd never signed for. My name was everywhere, but none of it was mine. I called the bank, desperate to explain. Sir, your account is overdrawn by $12,000, the woman on the line said flatly, like I was some scammer. I swore I never touched that money. She didn't believe me. I tried another credit company, same story. My voice shook as I begged. That wasn't me. Someone's using my identity. The pause on the other end was worse than the denial. Then you need to file a police report. Until then, it's your debt. I drove straight to my parents' house, slamming the door behind me. Ryan was there, lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone like he didn't have a care in the world. He didn't even look up. Did you do this? I demanded, holding out the stack of letters with trembling hands. He smirked, leaning back like I was just entertaining him. Relax, bro. I was just keeping things afloat while you were gone. You should be thanking me. Thanking you? My voice cracked, half rage, half heartbreak. You ruined my life. Mom came in then, her face stern, her voice sharp. Stop blaming your brother for everything. He's been the only one holding this family together. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. He wasn't just stealing my name. He was stealing my place in this family too. And for the first time, I wondered if I'd ever get it back. I stormed out of my parents' house that night, clutching the letters like they were proof of my own slow execution. The streetlights blurred through my tears as I sat in my car, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles went white. I wasn't free. I was shackled to debts, fraud, and a brother who'd stolen my very identity. The next few weeks were a blur of rejection and humiliation. Every job application I sent was denied the second they ran a background check. Landlords laughed when I tried to rent. Sorry, with that credit score? Not a chance. Even utilities turned me away. It was like Ryan had set fire to every bridge I'd ever need to rebuild my life. One night, I ran into an old friend who'd always kept his ear to the ground. He lowered his voice when he saw me. Man, Ryan's been flashing a new car around, says it's his. But I swear I saw the papers. Your name's on that registration. My heart sank. I pressed him for more, and that's when he dropped the real bomb. He didn't stop there. Word is he bought a house too. Got a mortgage under your name. He's living large, bro, on your life. I felt sick, like the world was spinning out from under me. A house? How was that even possible? My phone buzzed right then. Another creditor. Another demand for payment I'd never agreed to. I drove past the address my friend gave me. And there it was. A 2-story home with a fresh coat of paint, new cars in the driveway, lights glowing warm through the windows. Inside I could see silhouettes, Ryan laughing, drinks in hand, people around him. He was thriving while I was suffocating. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as rage burned through me. He hadn't just taken my credit, he had stolen my entire future, and that's when I knew I couldn't just survive this. I had to fight back. The night I saw him in that house, laughing like a king in a castle he built on my ashes, something inside me cracked. I sat in my car until the engine cooled, staring at the glow from his windows, thinking about every hour I'd spent rotting in that cell while he built this life, my life. The next morning, I tried to get answers. I went to the mortgage company demanding they check the paperwork. The woman behind the desk clicked her pen, shuffled some pages, and then looked at me like I was dirt. Sir, your signature is right here. She turned the form toward me and my own name stared back at me, only it wasn't mine. It was Ryan's forgery, sloppy but close enough to pass. My throat went dry. Ma'am, that's not me, I whispered. She shrugged. Then you need to take that up in court. But as far as we're concerned, you owe us. I walked out, the world spinning. Every creditor, every bank, every piece of my life had his fingerprints smudged all over it. And no one believed me. I went back to my parents' house again, ready to scream. Ryan was there, flipping through channels like nothing was wrong. I slammed the paperwork down in front of him. "You forged my name." "You ruined me!" He didn't even flinch, just smirked. That same smug smirk he'd had since we were kids. "You were gone." Someone had to step up. "Don't act like you were doing anything with your life anyway." My chest tightened, my vision blurred. "You stole everything from me." "Correction," he said calmly, sipping his drink. "I built something out of nothing. You should thank me for proving it could be done." I wanted to hit him, to shake him until he admitted what he did. But my mom's voice cut through the haze. "Stop blaming your brother. You made your choices." And in that moment, I realized I was alone. Completely, utterly alone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the thin mattress in my dingy rented room, one of the only places that didn't require a background check, staring at the cracks in the ceiling. My mind replayed Ryan's smirk, my mom's words, the mortgage papers with my forged name. It was like I was trapped in some sick movie where the villain always wins. But something inside me shifted. Maybe it was the rage boiling so hot it numbed the shame. Maybe it was the realization that if I didn't fight back, he'd keep stealing until there was literally nothing left of me. Either way, I knew I couldn't just keep yelling at walls that refused to hear me. I needed proof. I needed leverage. The next morning I started small. I pulled my credit reports, every last page of them. And there it was, line after line of debt, loans, cars, and that mortgage. Each one a nail in the coffin Ryan had built for me. But this time, instead of despair, I felt something sharper, clarity. I went digging. Old emails, bank statements. I even called one of the dealerships where I supposedly bought a car. The salesman bragged on the phone about how smooth the deal went, how I had brought in my driver's license. My driver's license, which was still sitting in my wallet. The cracks in Ryan's little empire were showing, and I was ready to pry them open. That night, I drove back to that glowing house. I parked across the street, my hands sweaty on the steering wheel. I watched through the curtains as Ryan laughed with friends, his arm around a woman I'd never met, raising a glass like he was untouchable. But all I could think was, I've got the first pieces. Now I just need more. And for the first time, the idea of taking him down didn't feel impossible. It felt inevitable. For the first time since I got out, I stopped feeling like a victim and started feeling like a person with a job to do. I spent days hunched over my laptop, the screen's glow carving tired circles under my eyes, pawing through bank PDFs, scanned contracts, and old text threads. Every forged signature I found made my stomach clench, but it also sharpened my focus. This was proof, not just pain. I learned to read the little tells of a fake, the slant of a pen stroke, a misspelled middle name, the way a date had been changed. Those tiny lies were suddenly my ammunition. I called a lawyer on a whim, hands shaking so much I almost dialed the wrong number. "You're telling me your brother built mortgages and car loans under your name?" he asked, incredulous. "If we move fast, we can freeze some accounts and get a temporary restraining order." Hearing him say words like freeze and restraining order felt like someone handing me back a piece of myself. I told him everything, about jail, about the bar, about Mom and Dad's silence. He listened without pity, which felt foreign and right. While I was gathering documents, an old acquaintance sent me a voice memo he'd saved from months ago. Ryan bragging to a friend about how easy it was to get loans using my identity, laughing about the perfect signature. I played it in my car with the heater on, and the sound of his voice laughing at me made bile rise in my throat. I recorded it onto a flash drive like it was a talisman. Then another bomb dropped. I pulled a tax transcript and saw returns filed in my name with business income I'd never earned. "He's been laundering money through shell companies," the lawyer said over the phone. "This is deeper than identity theft."
"We need to move now." My chest tightened, not from fear, but a cold, clean resolve.
I printed everything, folders thick under my arms, and drove straight to the firm. I was ready to file. I was finally going to make him answer. I stepped into the lobby, pressed the elevator button, and watched my reflection in the polished metal, haggard, determined, dangerous in a way I'd never let myself be before. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mom. "Ryan's coming to the courthouse. Please don't do anything dramatic." The courthouse smelled like old paper and disinfectant, a place where lives were picked apart in neat rows of folders. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my palms damp against the polished wood, a stack of evidence files in front of me like armor. My lawyer leaned in, whispering, "Stay calm. We have him cornered." But my chest was tight, my stomach knotted. Then the doors creaked open, and in strolled Ryan, dressed in a tailored suit he probably bought with my stolen credit. He smirked when our eyes met, like this was all some twisted game. Behind him, our parents shuffled in, Mom clutching her purse like it contained the family's last shred of dignity. When she saw me, her eyes weren't soft with concern. They were sharp, full of blame. The judge called us to order, and my lawyer began presenting the trail: forged signatures, false mortgages, car loans, the damning audio recording where Ryan laughed about using my identity. The room was quiet except for the shuffling of papers and the judge's steady voice. Ryan's lawyer tried to spin it, saying I had given permission while in jail, that it was a family arrangement gone sour. My fists clenched under the table. I wanted to shout, to leap up and scream that my life had been burned to ashes while he built his kingdom on my name. But instead, I watched as the judge leaned forward, brows furrowed. Then my lawyer slid across the final piece, the tax fraud transcripts. The room shifted, the air growing heavier. "Mr. Hayes," the judge said, his voice sharp, "are you aware that filing false returns under another's social security number is a federal crime?" For the first time, Ryan's smirk faltered. His jaw tightened. His eyes darted toward our parents, then back to the bench. I felt a strange satisfaction coil in my chest. For years, he'd laughed while I drowned. Now, with every word read into the record, the water was rising around his neck. But then came the shock I didn't see coming. My mother stood up, her voice trembling but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your Honor, my younger son is lying. Ryan would never do this. He's just jealous." The courtroom went dead silent. Her words cut sharper than any blade. I sat there, frozen, as my own mother pointed at me with shaking hands, her face twisted in loyalty I would never earn. The courtroom buzzed, whispers rolling like waves, but all I heard was the echo. Ryan would never do this. He's just jealous. My lawyer shot me a glance, calm but tense, whispering, "Don't react. Let the evidence speak." But my throat burned. For a second, I wasn't a grown man fighting for his life. I was a boy again, standing in the kitchen while Ryan got away with another lie. While Mom scolded me for being too harsh, Ryan seized the moment. He leaned forward, flashing his fake charm at the judge. "See? Even my family knows what's going on here. He's always been bitter. He just can't stand that I've made something of myself." I wanted to slam my fist down, to scream that he hadn't made anything. He'd stolen everything. Instead, I sat stone still, nails digging into my palms, and waited. Then my lawyer rose, his voice steady. "Your Honor, family opinion doesn't outweigh documented proof, and we have overwhelming proof." He laid down the mortgage agreements, the dealership statements, the forged contracts. One by one, the judge examined them, his face unreadable. But the moment that broke the tension came when he played the audio recording. Ryan's own voice, laughing about forging my signature, bragging about how easy it was. The courtroom gasped. My mother's face drained of color. Even my father shifted uncomfortably, finally looking away from Ryan. The judge's gavel struck once, sharp. "Enough, the evidence is clear. This is fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion. Mr. Hayes, you will be held accountable." Ryan's mouth opened, but no words came out. His face, once smug, now looked pale, his confidence unraveling in front of everyone. I sat back, heart pounding, as I realized the tide had finally turned. But victory didn't feel sweet, not yet. Because my own parents still glared at me like I was the traitor, and I knew the real fallout hadn't even begun. The judge's words rang in my ears, but it was Ryan's silence that struck me hardest. For the first time in my life, he didn't have a slick comeback or a cocky grin. His lawyer tried to regroup, stumbling over half-baked arguments, but the evidence was stacked too high. Every forged line, every stolen dollar, every falsified tax return, there was no escaping it. When the verdict came down, it felt like the air in the room shifted. The court ordered restitution, asset seizure, and a criminal investigation into the fraud. The house, the cars, the accounts, all of it was stripped from him piece by piece. Ryan sat there with clenched fists, his face pale, eyes darting like a cornered animal. My lawyer whispered, "We won. You're free of this now." But the weight in my chest didn't lift. Not when I glanced back at the gallery and saw my parents' faces. Twisted not with relief, but with fury. directed at me. As the judge adjourned, Mom rushed to Ryan, wrapping him in her arms like he was the victim. "We'll get through this," she whispered loudly enough for me to hear. Dad shook his head at me like I'd committed some unforgivable sin. I wanted to scream, to shout that I hadn't asked for any of this, that I had been the one in jail, the one left in ruins, the one who had clawed my way back with nothing but scraps of evidence. But their eyes told me the truth. They would never see Ryan as guilty, never see me as anything but the scapegoat. As marshals escorted Ryan out, he turned his head just enough to smirk at me, one last flicker of defiance. It wasn't the grin of someone who had won. It was the grin of someone who swore he'd get even. And for the first time I wondered, even with the verdict, was this really over? Walking out of that courthouse should have felt like freedom, but instead it felt like standing in the wreckage of a war I hadn't wanted to fight. Reporters clustered outside, shouting questions about fraud and identity theft, their cameras flashing like lightning. I kept my head down, clutching the thick folder of documents that had both saved and scarred me. That night, I sat alone in my tiny room, the silence pressing in. The victory tasted hollow. My credit would take years to repair. The trust I'd once had in my family was gone forever, and the brother I'd spent a lifetime protecting was now my sworn enemy. I stared at my phone, at the dozens of missed calls from Mom, and each one carried the same message. You destroyed this family. But as the hours passed, something inside me shifted. I realized I hadn't destroyed anything. I had simply pulled the mask off what was already broken. Ryan had built his empire on lies, and our parents had fed his delusions by protecting him at every turn. All I had done was stop being his shield. The next morning, I drove past his old house, the one that would soon be repossessed. The lawn was overgrown, foreclosure papers taped to the door. Neighbors walked by, whispering, their eyes full of judgment. For once, it wasn't me they were judging. It was him. I rolled down my window, inhaling the cool morning air, and for the first time in years, I felt a strange calm settle over me. He had lost the cars, the house, the money, and sooner or later he'd lose the freedom he had stolen from me. I had lost my brother, maybe even my parents. But I'd gained something more important: peace. And as I drove away, I thought to myself, sometimes justice doesn't come in the form of forgiveness. Sometimes it comes in watching the person who ruined you lose everything they ever loved.